Kate Winkler Dawson.
And I'm Paul Holes.
This is Buried Bones. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Kate, how are you?
I'm doing really well, and here's why. This is one of my favorite days of the year. Okay, December 3rd.
Okay.
Because it's my twin's birthday.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Oh, isn't it sweet? I mean, I love my kids so much. And I love it that I'm in December, they're in December. They're Sagittarius, I'm Capricorn. So I love having a winter birthday with them. It's so sweet.
Yeah, now you've got a lot of things going on in December then with the holidays.
It kind of starts with Halloween with me.
Okay.
We go Halloween, it gets hectic. And then, 'cause 3 weeks later-ish, you have Thanksgiving and then the girl's birthday. And then we have, Christmas and my birthday is right after that and New Year's. And so it's wild. It's crazy. But they love it. They love it. I mean, they're really they like having a birthday together. Of course, you don't have a choice when you're a twin, but they like having the birthday together. But my kids. So tell me first how your kids. I know you have 2 older ones, 2 younger ones. But how did they like to celebrate birthdays? Any special way? They parties the whole way through?
No, I would say the younger kids ended up having more of a group of friends that they would have over, like the special friends. Mm-hmm. My older kids, not so much. They would just have 1 or 2 friends, but not as big of a group as the younger kids.
Well, they used to do that. They have similar friend groups, and so they would have sometimes like a big party, and we have like a hot tub. They would get in the hot tub and so they would do that sometimes. Now we sort of just do family stuff, and then one will go with one best friend and the other will go with the other best friend. But one of my girls started doing something interesting last year. She asked if she could go to her favorite restaurant, which is the steakhouse. She's really big on seafood and steak and all that stuff. And I said, okay, do you want me to take you? And she said, no. And I said, do you want to go with like your best friend? And she said, no. And I said, who are you going with? And she wants to go by herself. And so I almost felt like last year I had to call the restaurant and say, I've got this kid. She's going to have a credit card. Just let her do what she wants to do. It's authorized. And she wants to do that again this year. So she goes and she has what she wants to have. And she'll get like this little molten, chocolate cake for free. And then she'll come home and we'll do a little family celebration. But that's what she wants, to listen to her music and, and eat at an expensive steak restaurant.
Kind of adult.
Yeah.
She
likes space. She's a kid that needs space. And so she really, I don't know, that's just the ideal way that she would do it. Is that what would you do for your birthday, ideally?
Yeah, I'm probably very similar to her. I really don't acknowledge my birthday. After you have so many of them, it's just
many Paul Holes.
It's a reminder that there's less life left than what has been lived. So,
oh my gosh. I told you what my mom says. She just turned 82, and she said, I am going to shout it from the rooftops every year, because how many people don't make it to 82? So
sure.
I am trying to adopt that. I think that's a very positive attitude. Unlike your, every year I'm closer to death.
Maybe I need to change my mindset a little bit.
No, I mean, I understand that. We also, in my family, like to tell really good stories. And, this is not a story I would tell my kids, the one I'm getting ready to tell you, but it fits into our winter theme. And it's going to be really, really interesting. It's a Cold War mystery. And I think we had some conspiracy stuff, but not specifically about the Cold War. And this is a really big story, so it's a 2-parter. And I for sure need your help, because there's a lot of snow avalanche talk. Like, what is happening in this scene? And I know nothing about the mountains, so I think you're going to have some good insight.
Okay, well, I'll do my best.
All right. Okay, let's set the scene. Okay. There are so many photos that go along with this that I had to send you several different packets. So I'll call for okay, let's go to the diagram of this and that for you to be able to look. And you can just condense, what you're looking at, what's the basic summary. But I'm happily in an area, 1959, where there were a lot of photos available. So I think that'll please you. I know it always does. You try to pretend, you try to play it off and go, oh no, I love these 1800s and 1700s stories. But secretly, you would like more stories, I bet, with photos.
I'm always more comfortable with photos, but it works.
We make it work.
Yep.
All right, here we go. So this is set in Russia, Siberia. So please, 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 everybody just, look at this with some grace when I try to go through some of these Russian names. I'll do the best I can. So it might take a hot second for me to make sure I'm getting the pronouncer. You too, Paul. Make sure I'm getting the pronouncer right. Okay, let's see. We are in the mountains. We start in the mountains and we end in the mountains on this one. So we're above the tree line on height 1079 in the Ural Mountains. And this is an area that's barren and rounded, and the range runs north to south, which is marking the border of Siberia and dividing Europe from Asia.
Okay.
And this is a place that people like to explore. And this is 1959. So the atmosphere already, I know you're going to want to talk about trying to figure out mysteries and murders in outdoor environments. And snow must be one of the biggest challenges. Which is worse, do you think, in certain circumstances? Is it rain or is it snow or is it both?
To be frank, I've never processed a crime scene in the snow coming out of the Bay Area, California.
Oh, it's true.
I've definitely reviewed crime scenes, that occurred, where it had snowed. And there, what I was fascinated when I was starting to see, crime scene images is you see so much more because let's just say shoe impressions. You can start to see where the offender has walked, and kind of there's more information to reconstruct what happened if it's, still somewhat pristine, if you will. Rain sucks. I will tell you that processing a crime scene in the rain, you're losing evidence as time goes on. You can't really take notes. The photos, flash bounces off the raindrops. So your photos turn out looking like crap. So I would say if it's a good snow, it's still cold enough to where the snow is solid. That's probably better than having to process a crime scene in the rain.
Well, this is cold snow. So maybe that's good news for us.
Good.
It's February 26, 1959. And the temperatures have been hovering around 0 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. And then at night, I think it's funny, Allison, who's our crack researcher here, she says dip as low as negative 30 degrees.
Okay.
At night. And what would be the coldest that Colorado and the mountains would get, do you think?
Well, I think if you started this out by saying that this is above the tree line. So that tells me that we're at a pretty serious elevation. I'm guessing, roughly around 10,000 feet. And when you get out into the Rockies in the Front Range, you start to see the tree line once you get to roughly that elevation, and it gets cold. I have Pikes Peak in my rear yard almost at 14,000 feet, and it's so much colder up at that elevation than at where I live, which is 6,500 feet. So, I'm sure there's places, at higher elevations in the Rockies that are going to match this location out here in Siberia.
Well, the snow is 5 feet deep.
Oh, wow.
And earlier in the month, listen to this, the winds had whipped through the pass at 65 miles per hour.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So we have a search party who is going into this environment. And it's a student along with some teacher volunteers from a technical university. And they are searching for 9 people associated with the university who are all professional explorer hikers. and who have been in this area before. So it is 7 men and 2 women, and they're all incredibly experienced. I mean, all kinds of certifications and whatever they needed to do. They've done really, really difficult things in the past, but they haven't heard from them. And so there's a search party that goes out. What will be important later on is part of the search party is a group of indigenous people called the Manzis. And so, they're helping out because they know the area also. And they had set out 6 days earlier than what we're talking about. So on February 20th, the search party left, and they have been tracing the ski tracks that they believe belong to this little expedition, is what I'll call them. And the tracks brought them to this gentle 30-degree slope. And they immediately come to the first alarming thing that they find. And I will sort of disclose this to say why we are doing this story is that we have these missing hikers. They will be found. The question is what happened? And it has been this incredible mystery ever since 1959. So here's the first clue in what is, to me, one of the more concerning clues. Okay. So they're at this gentle 30-degree slope. They look down and there's a shallow dugout that is meant to shelter hikers from the wind. They find a tent that they believe belongs to the expedition team, and it is slashed and partially collapsed. And there are no hikers inside. Let me get through this little bit, and then we're going to look at the tent and kind of, you can tell me what you think. So I'll have diagrams of the tent and what the slashes look like. And then I'll have photos of the tent and what those are. So there are no hikers. There's one tent pole that sticks above the snow. It was, this tent was constructed by stitching 2 canvases together. And the tent is 6 feet by 13 feet. Seems pretty big. It's designed to hang on trees, but it could also be sort of hitched up on a pair of skis, in an emergency, several skis. And there is a working flashlight that's balanced on the top edge of the tent. There's a pair of skis that's propped up in the snow nearby. There are 8 other pairs of skis that are well organized under the tent. And there's an ice axe and a jacket that's nearby. And it looks like all 9 people in the expedition, were there at one point. So there's 9 pairs of skis there for the 9 hikers. And then you've got the slashes in the tent. And I could tell you more details about what's actually inside the tent.
Well, at least with what you've told me, it sounds like this expedition team, who are very experienced with the conditions, they all made it to this location safely. And they were able to set up a tent. All the skis are organized. They recognize that this dugout was probably the best shelter. Maybe they saw inclement weather coming in, or this was just going to be how far that they were going to be going on that particular day. So they get to this location and everything is normal. And then something happens that causes this, them to, again, do they leave voluntarily, or does something else happen, and then of course the damage to the tent where I'm, my immediate thought is, okay, well, you mentioned the wind, ripping through at 65 miles an hour previously. Do you have damage to the tent as a result of weather? Do you have damage to the tent as a result of, large animal? Are there bears in this location? And then, of course, do we have maybe another group that had bad intent that crossed paths with this expeditionary team? So I'm kind of curious to see how this unfolds.
Okay. Yes, I am too, because this, like I said, is a big, big mystery. Okay, let me tell you, this is a lot of details. So just let me plow through all the details of what's actually inside what sounds like is a giant tent. So inside, hiking gear is neatly arranged. To the left of the entrance, there are 7 pairs of felt boots and 6 pairs of ski boots. To the right, there are cooking provisions, 2 large axes, one small axe in a leather case, and 3 finished knives, all-purpose belt knives with a curved cutting edge. And one is actually still in the sheath. There are 2 buckets, 2 cooking pots, a suspended stove, bags of biscuits, pork loin. There's alcohol. They think it's probably vodka. There's hiking gear and clothes in the center of the tent. 2 more pairs of ski boots and 9 backpacks containing 9 parkas, 8 quilted jackets, 1 fur coat. And then there's, this is a lot of stuff. I had no idea. I should have known. 4 pairs of shell pants. Just a lot of clothing in there. And there's 3 compasses, 1 pocket watch, and several blankets. And there's just food and provisions, and there's a first aid kit in there. And it feels like they were sort of caught in the moment. It's not a chaotic scene. It's the tent and the missing hikers that are problematic. I have information about where they think they might have gone, because there are, what you and I had talked about earlier, there are footprints leaving, shoe prints leaving the tent, and there's also the damage to the tent. Do you have a preference on what we talk about first?
I think, the damage to the tent is what I'm kind of keying in on. Everything inside this tent, this expeditionary team, they were well prepared. Mm-hmm. And this tent, it's something that took a while to set up and get all of those materials inside of that tent in an organized fashion. So it seems like that they just decided this is where we're going to be staying for a bit. So what caused them to leave without this material?
Yeah.
Because a lot of this material, that you've got the boots and the coats and everything else, this is all survival gear that you're going to need at this elevation, at these temperatures. And they're not going to voluntarily just leave that stuff behind.
Mm-hmm. And even more concerning to me was it's almost like I had mentioned before, a frozen moment in time, because they have this stuff called salo, which is a high-calorie white pork fat, and it's a Slavic delicacy. It is sliced, and it's ready to eat, and it's frozen on the table. So it hasn't been covered. It's almost like somebody had just cut it and was getting ready to eat it. And there's a jug of cocoa that had been mixed with water, and that jug is iced over at this point. And there is a stack of wood right next to the fire, like kind of put into the stove, a stack of wood right next to the stove, as if somebody was just getting ready to load it in. And they have a journal, and they have cameras and individual diaries that are right there. And then they only had about $10, 710 rubles in there. And so it's almost like something happened where they were living in it and they immediately left.
Yeah, it's odd.
Just get ready to say that a lot.
Yeah, okay. What's the size of this team again? How many?
Okay, and I know I call them an expedition. They're sort of like, they're pro hikers who are also students. There's 9 of them.
9.
And okay. I have photos of them and them in the snow, in the actual snow, chronicling this trip. They found their cameras. And so you can see what the snow looks like. And I also have the boot impressions in the snow.
Okay.
So you tell me where you want to go now.
Yeah. Right now I want to see the scene.
Okay. So let's do that. Yeah. Let's get to the scene. Okay. If we look at what I called hikers in fun snow, that's what the snow looks like. But I don't think I have the photos of the tent. These are like scene photos that they took themselves.
Okay.
These are not evidence photos. So if you open it, you'll see the 9 members of the team, and then you'll kind of just see their fun. They were documenting their lives on this trip.
Yeah, they look young.
They are. They're students at this technical school.
Okay.
And I'll tell you a little bit more about them once we get there, since I know we need some victimology and stuff. We're not far from that.
So, the first photo that I'm seeing, once I get past the portraits of the team, it looks like the team is in the back of some sort of utility truck, like, not quite a pickup truck. It has the wooden railing that they're leaning against, but they're all dressed appropriately. They've got heavy jackets with hoods and heavy mittens on, the kind of the fingerless gloves, which are, really good for, the frigid temperatures because you're able to keep more warmth inside those mittens. And then it appears in the front that there is some sort of carrying pack, that's on the floor. So I'm sure that contains a lot of the supplies. And then the next photo shows 3 of them up against this structure that's constructed out of a tree trunk and then some horizontal branches. And so there's 3 of these tree trunks, and each tree trunk has 3 horizontal branches on, nailed to them. And it appears like, some of the skis are being leaned up against these structures. I haven't seen this type of structure before.
They're using it to clean the skis off. That's the purpose of that structure, is so they can kind of sit and clean everything on, putting their boots too, I'm sure. Yeah,
that makes sense. It's clever. And there's more that are, further in the backdrop. But I'm also taking a look at where they're doing this. They're still below the tree line. You have some, whether they're aspens, that are, tall, but sparse. It's not like a super wooded area where they're located at. And then scrolling down, the next photo is a photo of them where they're now hiking. They got their snowshoes or their skis on with their ski poles, very heavily garbed up with weather clothing, the heavy jackets and the pants. And it appears that at the time of this photo, there's probably the snow is blowing, so, they've got some weather that they are having to hike through. And then the next photo is showing a tent with 2 of the hikers kind of around this tent. And I can see the ski poles that have been stuck in the snow. They've rigged up a way to hold this tent up. Now, this tent is only, even though you mentioned the tent was 16 by 13 feet, it's only maybe 3 feet tall.
And that might be a different tent, because they had several tents from what I've read. And I actually did find photos of the collapsed tent, so you can have a better idea of that too.
Okay. So maybe they had multiple tents available to them versus all of them going into the one structure.
Yep.
And then the last photo, they're just cross country skiing. That's what it looks like. They're following in each other's tracks, probably taking turns as to who's in the lead, because that's going to be the most challenging part of this. And it looks beautiful. You got pristine snow. You've got mountains in the backdrop with the trees, and maybe there's a frozen lake up ahead. So it's it's nature. They're out there, but it does look like it's fairly remote. I don't see any human-made structures in this photograph at all.
No, and I'm going to show you some photographs. I'm actually going to send them to you real quick, Paul.
Okay.
In my extravaganza of photos, I missed these 2 that I think will be really helpful.
Okay.
So look at those, and you can do them in either order, but there's a wide, and this is the tent.
So this is the damaged tent.
Yep. There's a wide and there's a close-up one.
Yeah, so I'm initially looking at an overall photograph. This is how we would call this type of photo from a crime scene, where it's capturing basically the entire scene. In the middle, it's just snow all around where this collapsed tent is at. There's no other structures. It appears that there is a peak of a mountain in the backdrop. And the tent itself really just looks like dark fabric on top of the snow. And then this is where the skis have been, stuck vertically in the snow around where this tent is. So those skis, I'm assuming, possibly helped hold up the tent in some capacity.
Yep. Because they don't have trees around. So I think they either had to use skis or trees. Yeah. And then I think they had some tent poles with them. I'll have to look again, though.
And then the other photo, which is a close-up of this collapsed tent. So this photo is showing the tent that is, I'm not even sure how I'm going to describe this. Basically the tent is collapsed down. There appears to be a fair amount of heavy snow deposit on the top surface, covering visibility on the top of this tent. In the foreground, the closest to the person taking the photograph, you can see where there's either, a what do you call them? A ski. What you use as you're skiing, but you
like a ski pole?
Ski pole. So, it appears that part of the fabric is covering something like a ski pole, to where maybe that was the entrance into the tent. And there's some cordage that's probably securing that part of the tent to the ski pole or whatever it is that's holding it up. Towards the rear, there's several skis that are vertical, that probably were there to help hold this tent up at some point. And I'm also seeing some ski poles in the foreground that appear to be mostly buried. The snow is heavily disturbed. And this is where, is this the condition when the search team, first arrives, or has there been a lot of disturbance to the scene before this photograph is taken? So right now, I don't know how to interpret what I'm seeing, but, it's heavy deposits of snow, chunks of snow on top of this tent. And I'm surprised at that. I thought, okay, with, over time with weather blowing, you'd start to see, the snow just naturally deposit on top of the tent, even in this collapsed state. This almost looks like there's been chunks of snow thrown on top of the tent, maybe in an effort to hide it, like somebody is trying to bury it, but doesn't quite get it completely buried.
Well, and to give you a little bit more context, so they're using the diaries. The search teams are using the diaries and later on investigators to figure out how far people got. So, because you remember they have journals and diaries that they found in the tent.
Right.
And it's confirmed that on January 31st, they had reached this area. They dug a snow pit, unloaded their heaviest gear in it. And the next day they planned, so February 1st, they planned to ski toward the mountain pass. But that's it. That's the last entry. Where the journals were found at that location, they had been missing or whatever happens to them starting February 1st, and it is now February 26th.
Yeah.
So that could also explain the snow. How much is on there?
Yeah, I just think the configuration of the snow looks wrong to me for it just being done by weather. And those journals are absolutely key from, a temporal standpoint. As you said, they said they made it out there on January 31st. They were going to go ski on February 1st. And there's no other entries into the journals after that.
Yep.
And, of course, I'd be wanting to take a look at the journals. Each person probably has their own frequency that they're putting entries in. So do some of these journals have entries every day and that it just stops? Or is it more sporadic to where, maybe there's additional days where there is normal activity occurring at this location and they just never made another entry just because they weren't doing it on a daily basis?
Let's talk about the tent, or do you want to talk about them leaving? Which do you prefer?
Well, since I just described the tent, let's get more details about the tent.
Okay. So the tent, it looks like, you can go ahead and bring up your photos, and while you're doing that, I'll go through this. The tent and its contents, were eventually collected from the slope and rebuilt inside a police station in Ural. This is where kind of the main investigation will start. A seamstress mending police uniforms remarks the tent slashes, which have been made from the inside. And an expert confirms these were slashes made from the inside. So, there's different information about the tent and how big the slashes were. But let me see. They might have it on the diagram. Do they have it on the diagrams? How big these slashes were? I have it in here.
Should I open that up then?
Yes. Go ahead and open up the tent details one. Tent diagrams and photos.
Got it. Okay.
And then you could just do an overall summary of what you see.
Yeah, so this first, it's a sketch. However, it's a sketch that's been made using a straight edge. So it's very neat. And the configuration of this tent is like an A-frame. So the fabric, the way the tent was designed in order to be put up would be, in essence, you have a long ridge line from front to back with an entry that's shaped like a triangle in the front where people can go in and out of this tent. And then you would have to have various mechanisms such as the ski poles, to hold up this tent from the inside, as well as potentially, using twine at both ends to hold up the ridge line. On the sloped face of this tent, there is a drawing of what I'm assuming is the damage to the fabric. And it's significant in terms of the size of the damage. It appears that there's, for example, there is a red arrow labeled number 1, which is pointing at sort of a linear defect on this tent roof. And there's a number 31 with 2 arrows emanating out of it that goes along the length of that defect. So I'm interpreting that is 31 units log. I don't know if it's centimeters. I don't know if it's inches, but it's 31 log. And then directly above that is more of a curvilinear defect with a red number 2, red arrow pointing at it. And that defect has 89 units marking it. And then you have large areas of fabric just in the middle on this roof side, which they're indicating with cross hatching what I'm going to assume that there's missing fabric. And there's no real measurements across, how large this is, but it appears, if this is relatively done to scale, appears to be a significant amount of fabric that has been removed, but not in a very regular fashion. There's a lot of irregularities to some of the margins of this damage, and there appears to be a very long tongue of fabric in the middle of this that is still remaining. And so it's almost as if you have 2 rectangular openings and then a flap that was left behind. And then there's the measurement roughly 42 inches or 42 units wide for that fabric in the middle of this damage. And then further down, there appears to be a linear defect that goes all the way from the top of the tent down to where the tent would have been secured using cordage to tent spikes in the snow, and there appears to be some damage removed. So, this is not, the amount of fabric that has been, in essence, cut out from the roof of this tent is significant. So why would somebody do that? The way that's drawn, that's not done by an animal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see this occurring as a result of weather, so why is somebody doing this? And you said that experts claimed it was done from the inside.
Inside, yeah. Does it look like it would have been a knife would have had to have done it, or some kind of cutting instrument would have had to have done it?
Okay, so, these photos are showing the, more close-up of the damage to the tent fabric. So I can start to take a look and see, yes, there's no question that you're dealing with, a sharp-edged, chances are it's a knife. However, the way that some of the fabric has, these little pieces, there is an aspect of not only cutting, but possibly just tearing, maybe even where you start, with the knife, and then you just kind of more rapidly pull the fabric apart and tear it apart. They've got some good close-up photos with scale showing that, some of the fabric was cleanly cut in this close-up photo, but some of it appears that it also was pulled apart. Like they started it, and then now it's just getting it completely apart through a tearing action. There is one photo showing that side of the tent, where appears to be a fair amount of fabric missing. And it dawns on me, it's very possible that whoever did this was using this fabric to bundle something up, like to make a carrying case.
Oh, okay.
Or, depending on how much of that tent, I mean, it's possible it was used as like a wrap a body in,
Yeah.
So that seems to make sense to me. It's not random. Whoever did this, they're just not doing this for fun. It's not like, sometimes you'll get some cases where you have an offender that just wants to damage. It's like a form of vandalism. I don't think that's what's going on here. I think that there's maybe a functional aspect to why the offender is, I'm not even sure I can say offender, but why the person who is cutting the fabric, I think they want to use the fabric for something.
Yep. Okay. Well, good. I mean, the more confused you are, the better, I think. Okay. Let's step away from the tent. Okay. So if we come out of the tent, where we're looking next is, do we have any boot prints? We don't. We have footprints. They find a chain of 8 or 9 sets of footprints leading from the tent toward the tree line, less than a mile away. So the people who made those were either barefoot or wearing socks.
Yeah.
They said one person wore a single ski boot, but they're orderly. So there's not that sort of, kicking up snow like they're running. They're orderly, and, they're kind of going maybe next to each other or single file. I can't quite tell. But these footprints disappear a quarter of a mile from the tent or so.
Yeah. You think about where this is happening. You're talking 0 degrees down to, what was it, negative 30 degrees. They're in snow. The snow is 5 feet deep, thick. And these people are not voluntarily walking out of that tent without their boots on. They're being forced, and that basically they were told, move. And now how does that happen to a team of 9? Well, now you've probably got a group with guns saying, you guys are marching now. And you think how fast frostbite would set in without, the heavy boots on, without the proper clothing at this location. So I'm curious, where these footprints stop. Were there tracks, like snowmobile tracks? Was there, some sort of vehicle, any indication that there's a vehicle at this location that could pick this team up, whether the team is still alive or is killed at this location, or is there any bloodstains at this location, et cetera, but they just didn't disappear, unless, the investigators failed to dig into the snow and there's frozen bodies at this location that just got covered with snow over time.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, moving forward, they follow these footprints and then they lose them about a quarter of a mile from the tent.
And do they lose them because just snow covers them up? Is there any? Okay.
It looks like it.
Now, but I think even though, they may not have a full trail, this team was marched to a location, and was that location found? Were their bodies recovered? Or, again, were they transported somewhere else?
So the next day, they resumed the search at about 11 o'clock. They discovered the remains of a fire at the base of a tall cedar on that tree line's edge. And it's about a little more than a mile, maybe about a mile from the tent that had been slashed. They say based on the char of the wood, the fire appears to have been burned for about 90 minutes. The branches of the fir and birch trees within a 65-foot perimeter of the cedar have been cut. And they think with a finish knife, which is the knife I described for you, kind of a curved knife that they would use. The cedar's dry branches, which were 12 to 17 feet off the ground, have also been broken off. And let me just tell you what's at the scene. So there's various garments, including a half-burned brown sock, a green checkered shirt with 8 rubles in the pocket, and a woman's handkerchief, and they're all strewn around by the fire. And there are bodies there.
Oh, okay.
One thing that we do know details about the trip, and we know details about the school they went to and who all these people are. Would you rather talk about the trip when we get to kind of this first set of bodies and go backwards and say this is how the trip went? And do you want to hear about these people as they come up, or how do you want to do it?
Well, I think, with the finding of the bodies, that will give me better insight as to, okay, what was the offender's motive, if there is an offender, and then we can kind of get back and maybe start going into the victimology.
Okay, perfect. So they find initially two bodies, and we are going to call them Yuri and Krivo, and
Krivo.
Let me see. Okay, so Yuri, and then yes, we're gonna have to call him Kriva.
Kriva, okay.
Kriva. And here's why, and this is where I need a lot of forgiveness from people. So the first person is 21-year-old Yuri Doroshenko, but I'm calling him Yuri. And then there's a 23-year-old named Georgy Yuri Krivuneshchenko, and he went by Kriva. So with Yuri, he is lying face down with his head turned to the left. And remember, this is 6 to 10 feet from the fire, what once was a fire.
Okay.
His arms are bent at the elbows and his fingers are clenched. His hair is very dirty and tangled with moss and fir needles and burned near his right temple in the occipital region. Under his body are 3 or 4 cedar branches. And then I have information on what he's wearing. And lucky for you, we don't have autopsy photos, but we have very detailed autopsy diagrams of all of this. So do you want to see the diagram first, or do you want to hear about what he's wearing and some more of his injuries?
Yeah, tell me what they can see at the crime scene.
Okay. He's stripped to his undergarments. So he is wearing a light green sleeveless cotton undershirt, a blue and red checkered shirt, blue satin briefs, and blue knitted long underwear. The long underwear is missing a thigh panel. It's been torn or possibly cut with a knife. On his left foot, he wears 3 layers of socks, 2 light brown ones, knitted socks, and then 1 white woolen sock. And on his right foot, he wears 2 layers of cotton and wool socks. The outer socks on both feet are burned to tatters. Okay. Last thing about Yuri, his ears, lips, and nose are covered in blood. His upper lip is swollen. There are multiple small abrasions and bruises that cover his arms and legs. His fingertips and toes are dark purple in color, and the toes on his left foot are burned. So we can talk about Kriva, or you can look at the diagram of Yuri, and then we can go on to Kriva.
Let me look at the diagram of Yuri here.
So look under injuries.
The hemorrhaging and swelling to, his nose, his mouth. This all appears that he's being beat in the face. He's taking blows, possibly being punched. The extensive abrasions to his arms, even his hands, around the knuckles, they notice significant swelling, as if he possibly was, striking something himself, maybe fighting back against whoever's beating him. Part of the complexity of evaluating the injuries is you're dealing with probably crusty snow. You've got the branches that his body is on. Some of this could be a result of movement against, this hard snow or the branches. However, it appears that, he's probably being beat. The dark purple tissue at the tips of his fingers and toes suggests frostbite to me. So which it wouldn't be surprising, and it would probably happen really quickly out there. If he's been marched a mile dressed like this out to this particular location, I think you're going to start to see frostbite setting in. The burned hair, as well as, it appears that there's some other singeing or soot from the fire. Was he located closer to the fire at some point, and then his body was moved? Who knows what's going on there. But, I guess right now it's what were his fatal injuries? This diagram doesn't show that.
Okay, well, I can't tell you what their fatal injuries are. I mean, I can, but I can tell you what the government thinks versus, that's kind of what our main, I don't know. What do you want to do? Because when you look at it, the people, the search team does not know. They know there's blood, but they can't see. There's no stab wounds that they see. There's no gunshot wounds, anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, so, at this point, we don't know if Yuri died just as a result of exposure or if, he did, receive a fatal injury or multiple fatal injuries. But it does appear that he is interacting. There's violence being inflicted on Yuri. So that's now, tells me that, at least with Yuri, and I'm going to say with probably the rest of the team, this isn't where they ended up, taking too much vodka and some sort of psychedelic and just, wigged out and just, walked out into the elements. Goes back to in my initial assessment, they were forced out, and at least with Yuri and Kriva, they were forced out to this location of the campfire, whether that campfire pre-existed and they were marched there, or, the campfire was started once they got to that location. Also, the way that campfire, you're talking about dry branches being, taken off of the surrounding trees, tells me that you are dealing with somebody very experienced out in nature and recognized where the dry wood is versus maybe some of the other sources of fuel are still too moist in order to be able to start a fire. They had a means to start a fire, whether that be, you're talking 1959. So they could have had pretty much any modern contraption to start a fire, or they're skilled enough to be able to start a fire using what's available, with flint, etc. So in some ways you're dealing with bushcraft or, survivalist type of training.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you just a tiny bit about, since Yuri's our first victim here, I'll tell you just very briefly about the group. So, this was a sporting club, expedition club at a university that was a technical university, to which I thought, okay, what does that mean? They were all students or recent alumni and their majors were, or their jobs were in economics, nuclear physics, machine building, radio, and civil engineering. All of them. There was one named Sasha, who we haven't talked about yet, and he was not from part of that school. He came along. This was initially a 10-person expedition, not a 9-person, but one person had to drop out because of illness. So it turned into a 9-person team here. As I had said before, they're all experienced. And they were trained to become nuclear power and weapon and radio and aerospace engineers. So that's where we start when we talk about Yuri.
Yeah, and what was the purpose of them going out to this location?
They loved it. It wasn't a school thing. They were part of a sporting club at where they would do stuff like this. I mean, I have a lot of photos of them doing other expeditions, and so it was a sports club trekking expedition specifically that originated from this technical college, but not everybody went there.
Okay.
So this was a fun trip and stuff they've done before.
Yeah. So they didn't have a mission going out there.
No, not that we know of, not that they know, not that they said, and not that we know of. Right.
Right.
So we have another person who I mentioned to you, and he was Yuri Kriva. And so we call him Kriva. And he is found close by to Yuri. He's lying face up. His right arm is above his head. His left arm is bent so that his wrist lays across his chest. His right leg is extended. His left leg is bent at the knee. And just like Yuri, he's stripped to his undergarments. He is wearing a worn white cotton shirt, a red, blue, and black checkered shirt, blue satin swimming trunks, and long underwear. These two have been torn asunder. I mean, they're torn around, all this stuff. The entire bottom half of the left leg is missing. Its ragged edge is charred. His right foot is bare. On his left foot, he wears a burned and tattered brown sock. And then I have injuries for him. And you have a diagram.
Yeah. Now, I think some of the missing fabric from the victim's clothing, that may have been used as kindling to start the fire.
Okay.
I think the state of Yuri and Kriva, what clothes they are wearing,
mm-hmm.
It suggests, going back to the original tent location, that maybe they had undressed just for normal, staying inside the tent when the offenders came across them, and now they're just being forced out into the elements. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if the offenders forced the victims to undress as a further, means of control. It's sort of like, okay, you're going out there and you don't have the ability to just run away because you will die, right? Mm-hmm. So there may be an element of that where now the offenders are going, okay, get out in the elements in your pajamas, basically, mm-hmm. and you have to stay with us because you need us in order to survive. At least that may have been a message at the outset.
Well, let me tell you about Kriva's injuries. His face is covered in abrasions and scratches. The right side of his head is covered in blood. There's a contusion and a scratch on the left temple that have caused a swelling on the left side of his head. His ears are frostbitten. His lips and his eyes are swollen. The tip of his nose is missing and there's no blood. Both of his hands are charred black. A wound peels the skin on his left hand back. His right hand has a wound at the base of the thumb. There's a bite wound, possibly from an animal, but they aren't sure. The skin covering the middle phalanx of his third middle finger is completely bitten off. Blood is frozen between his discolored fingers. His left hip and his inner side of his left thigh have multiple straight edge lesions. His left shin, exposed by the torn underwear, is swollen. 3rd-degree burns cover shin to foot, and there is a 4 by 12-inch area that is charred brown and black, and the skin on his foot is peeling away. So, what is something that would happen naturally if somebody had a heart attack in the snow and were left there, frostbite or whatever, and what has to be some sort of horrible, attack?
Well, there's no question. Yuri and Kriva they're being beat. Sounds like Kriva, there may have been a knife used on him. The missing part of his finger, that's where, okay, you said it was like bitten off. Okay, what animals are out at this location? And it's unusual just to see like a middle finger missing. And so I'm questioning whether it was bitten. Could it have been cut off? Some aspects, maybe even with the fire, there could be a level of torture being inflicted on Yuri and Kriva, and then why would the offenders be doing this type of torture? Are they, trying to elicit statements, or find out what these two saw that maybe they shouldn't have seen? And my sense is that both Yuri and Kriva probably died as a result of blows, maybe, repeated blows to the head. But there's violence. There's a lot of violence going on to both of these victims.
Yep. And so we still have 7 more people to account for. So later in the day, same location, they go a half mile from that cedar tree and they find 2 more people. Okay.
2 more victims.
Yep. So you've got Igor and Zina, and they are a half mile from that cedar tree. Their bodies are on the slope facing the tent. Igor's body is face up behind a small birch. His legs are bent at the knees. His hands are pressed to his chest. His watch reads 5:31. And I think we need to jot that time down. That becomes important, I think, later on. 5:31. It doesn't say whether it's AM or PM. 5:31.
Right.
Zina is buried under firm snow above the tree line. Her arms are curled with her fists clenched, and they're under her body. Her right leg is lifted to her stomach, frozen in the position of like somebody is climbing, basically. She is warmly dressed. She wears go ahead. Do you want to talk about the injuries, or what do you think? And I also have bigger injuries to talk about.
Yeah, I was just going to try to clarify the buried in snow. Is this a result of just, snowfall, or did somebody purposely bury her?
They are not indicating that this is like a burial site. I think it's under snow. Both of these people, Igor and Zina, have more clothes on than either Yuri or Krivo did. They are still underprepared for being out here. Igor is wearing a cotton undershirt, a red checkered shirt, blue sweater, and a blue fur-lined vest, which is unbuttoned. He's also wearing black satin briefs, brown fleece ski pants, and some cotton sweatpants, and his socks are mismatched. On his left foot, he has like a brown sock, and it's definitely mismatched. Zina is more warmly dressed. She has a pinkish red wool cap over a blue wool knitted cap, a satin bra, blue knitted t-shirt, multicolored checkered shirt. She's got more clothing on. The left cuff of the wool sweater is worn off. A military-style mask is lodged under her checkered shirt. She's also wearing black cotton swimming trunks and black cotton bodysuit. Now, the swimming trunks I know sounds odd. I saw a couple of photos in my package of the huge package we had of them swimming in like a creek when it has to be below freezing. So I don't know if it was just for warmth. I've seen several of those photos. I think maybe that was a thing they like to do. So I don't know if that's at all helpful, but I wasn't surprised reading about the swimsuits.
Cold plunge.
Yeah. Good God. Yeah, exactly. That's right. On both feet, she has 3 layers of socks. Now I've got injuries whenever you're ready for those.
Yeah, I think, my only comment about the state of dress is it's still wholly inadequate. These two did not dress and voluntarily leave that tent and walk, basically 1.5 miles away.
Yeah.
So their state of dress is probably how they were hanging out in the tent before the offenders came in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, they both show signs of non-fatal, what they say is non-fatal blunt force trauma. Igor's face, his hands and his ankles are scratched and bloodied. His nose and his right hand knuckles are bruised by a blunt object, they think. Zena's face, especially on the right side, is purple, red, bruised and bloodied. The bridge of her nose is slightly concave. Her eyes and her lips are swollen. Her hands and fingers are a purple brownish color and badly scraped. Her right hand is an irregularly shaped wound with jagged edges and a scalped skin flap. The skin at the base of her third finger is gone. And then we will have some autopsy results because these bodies are shipped out, these 4 bodies, and they do an autopsy while trying to find, now we're up to 5 missing still.
Sure. I would say that Igor and Zena's injuries are, they're very similar to Yuri and Kreva's injuries. There appears to be, they're being beat. Is there some aspect of torture that's really hard to discern just from verbal description?
Mm-hmm.
But the question is why are they located separately from Yuri and Kreva, and they don't have any fatal injuries? I would suggest right now that possibly Igor and Zeno were able to run away after they had been beat, and then they succumbed to the elements. They got about 1 mile away, and then ultimately they succumbed. Whereas Yuri and Kreva, I think they likely had the fatal injuries inflicted at that campfire.
Okay. Well, we get the bodies taken, and they have forensic experts conduct the autopsies on all 4 of these folks. So this happens March 4th, which is, 5 days after they were discovered.
Yeah.
Their deaths are deemed violent and accidental. And they say they were caused by exposure and hypothermia. There's evidence, the evidence that they say is that there's swelling of the meninges. Is that how you say that? Okay.
In the brain.
Yeah. So they say the evidence they have is that there's swelling in the meninges. And there is, it is a dark liquid blood filling the cardiac cavity, and the presence of Vishnevsky spots. Have you heard of that before?
That doesn't sound familiar.
Dark brown to black, hemorrhagic. Is that how you say that? Lesions?
Hemorrhagic, yeah.
Between the Russian names and this, it's just like going to make my head explode. Okay. They are spots that are dark brown to black, hemorrhagic, right? Lesions on the gastric mucosa found during an autopsy. And it's a reliable indicator of fatal hypothermia is what they say.
Okay.
Does that sound right to you?
Again, I just don't have any experience, with this type of temperature in the cases that I've got. So these people are the experts. And so what they, in essence, are saying, at least with what you're telling me, is to say, all 4 of the victims were beat, possibly cut into at some point, or fingers smashed or cut off, whatever. Is there torture? I don't know, but I'm kind of leaning that there may be something like that. But none of the injuries, these pathologists couldn't say any of these injuries by themselves were fatal. The victims also had the exposure, and there's the evidence the medical evidence of the exposure. Now, with Yuri and Kriva, my sense is that they didn't have the ability, the wherewithal in order to be able to get away from that location. Whereas I still think Igor and Zena possibly were able to get away, but then ultimately the exposure got them.
So let me tell you some things that I found confusing. Everybody except for Yuri, all the other three people had overfilled bladders and 3rd and 4th degree frostbite on their fingers. And Yuri and Krivo had them on their toes. Based on the state of the body's decomposition and the contents of their stomach, the medical examiner, or the physicians, estimated that they died pretty quickly after these final diary entries that happened at the tent. They say between 6 and 8 hours, but we know that stomach contents are not going to be reliable. Overfilled bladders.
Yeah. Oftentimes after death, bladder's empty. We see that all the time. Was there, these bodies probably would freeze pretty quickly. I don't know if that would contribute to the lack of the bladders emptying. And overfilled, they weren't allowed to use the bathroom.
I guess.
Who knows? It's just, I don't think it's necessarily significant from a criminal aspect. That doesn't tell me much. I think, the injuries, the locations, the state address, that's all kind of adding into a certain aspect to this crime that is different than what we normally see out of homicidal violence.
Well, let me tell you about the autopsy findings. There's some little things that get picked up that obviously the searchers couldn't say. So one is Yuri's exposure was very extreme, more than anybody else's. They basically said if he had survived, he would have lost all of his fingers and toes. And they said, although he was found, now this is what I was thinking about you for criminals, the idea of whether or not this is, criminal in nature, even though he was found lying face down, his back exhibited livor mortis. And that, they say that meant that he might have been moved after death.
And I would say that's a certainty that he was moved.
Okay.
So livor mortis or lividity is after death, the heart is no longer moving the blood around. And so the blood settles inside the body with gravity. And it's one of those characteristics that we look for to determine whether or not the person died in the position as found or if the person has been moved after death. Mm-hmm. And with Yuri, who's face down, but his lividity is up opposite gravity, tells me he has been moved. He died and was on his back for a period of time. Now, the temperatures that his body is being exposed to, I think, can cloud, well, how long would that have been? Mm-hmm. But that lividity was there, that blood settled on his backside and was there in that position long enough to basically what we call fix in place. So when his body is moved, the blood doesn't just go back, down with gravity again to his front. Mm-hmm. So he's dead for a period of time, and then somebody moves him, turns him face down, probably further away from the fire, on top of these, cedar branches. Is
that nefarious or not? We don't know, right?
This is where it was that part of the original interactions between the offender and this crime scene, or did you have somebody else come after these two guys are dead and search them looking for valuables? You could have other hunters out there or other trekkers or whatever that may be contaminating this crime scene. But Yuri's body has been moved, and so that's, why his body is being moved versus the others. Maybe there's something there.
Okay. One thing that seems mysterious to me, they said they said that the soft tissue of his right cheek is covered with a gray foam. and gray liquid is leaching out of his open mouth. Is that blood? I mean, I don't even know what that would be.
Well, when we see, whether it be, sometimes when you see overdoses, you get this froth that can come up out of the mouth. If he's got some bleeding inside of his lungs, you can get this bloody froth as he's breathing with this blood inside, this liquid inside his lungs.
Mm-hmm.
The gray coloration, I'm not sure what to make of that. And I guess it's also, is there any correlation between that gray colored froth and his stomach contents?
I can tell you that Kriva had further abrasions along the right side of his chest and bruises on his left buttock. The chunk of skin missing from his right hand finger, remember I mentioned that, is discovered in his mouth.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah, and Igor's missing a central incisor in his lower jaw, but they think that this is a tooth that's been missing for a while, but they're not 100% sure. And then Xena, they found a very large bruise on the right side of her torso in the lumbar region, measuring 11.5 by 2.5 inches. It appears to be afflicted by something like a baton. Although she was found on her right side, her body exhibits livor mortis on her back. So another person that's been flipped or moved, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and we don't have everybody yet. There's 5 more people. This is a quadruple parter.
Yeah, the movement of the bodies, Yuri and Xena's bodies, may just be offenders coming back and checking, are they dead? Or other things. But, the tissue found in Kriva's mouth from his own finger.
Mm-hmm. Now,
he was the one that was missing part of his middle finger, like it had been bitten off.
It says the skin covering the middle phalanx or whatever that was of the third middle finger is completely bitten off.
Well, and so that's where now it's the skin covering his middle finger. So that's found in his mouth.
Yeah.
Okay, so why would he be biting his own middle finger to the point where he's removing a chunk?
Do you think that there's a chance, because all of these people are sort of stripped down, that phenomenon that happens with hypothermia where you go into a delusion and think taking your clothes off is going to actually make you warmer? And do you think anything like that could have happened with these folks?
I wouldn't discount, some aspect, since the autopsy findings indicate that all 4 of these victims died due to exposure. There is a possibility that towards, their end of life there is that they're not necessarily thinking straight. And that may be contributing to some of the autopsy findings. However, the extensive nature of the bruising and the abrasions and, all of that is suggesting that all 4 of them are being significantly beat. It may not have been fatal, but they are being beat significantly. So, there may be aspects of the victims after that where now they're not thinking straight, but, they didn't just walk out of the tent because of hypothermia. They are forced out of the tent and marched a significant distance away.
Well, we have to go back to our search, but because we have so many injuries that we've had to deal with, I think this is going to have to be, this part of the search is going to have to wait for next week. Because not only do we have 5 more missing people, but we have a lot of conspiracy theories and a particular group of people who are targeted with very little evidence. So there's a lot of speculation that happens in the second half of this.
Okay, well, it's I'm going to have to noodle on this one.
Oh, noodle. Okay. Do you not noodle on all of my two-parters?
Oh, Kate, sometimes they stick with me for the week, and sometimes I go, I'll just, just wait for you to throw me, the soft pitch the next episode.
Okay. All right.
Yep. Nope. Looking forward to hearing more about this one. It is interesting.
Okay. I'll see you in a week.
Sounds good.